You wait outside, old man.
That's what my younger boss told me as I accompanied him to a business meeting worth $30 million overseas. But it was scorching hot outside. In such conditions, waiting indefinitely is unreasonable. At worst, I might get heat stroke or sunstroke. But he ignored me, saying, "It's an order from your boss," and went inside the company alone for the meeting. Then about 5 hours later, the situation changed when the client saw me waiting outside as instructed.
Who do you think he is? What are you talking?
The truth about who I really am under this younger boss. My name is Kevin Smith, 40 years old. I work for a certain company. For certain reasons, I got a job at this company, but I was shocked by what I saw in the department I was assigned to.
So, the Kevin Smith who's gonna work in our department from today is you, old man. I'm Caden Brown, the manager. Geez, you look pretty useless. Just don't drag me down, all right?
On my first day at work, Caden, who is 10 years younger than me, looked down on me immediately. I had no idea why, but it seemed he judged me by my appearance. It was quite unreasonable. According to other employees, he was promoted unusually fast at the age of 30. The one who pushed him up was the president of the company, Caden's father, President Ron Brown. He seemed to be proud of his son, who graduated from Harvard, and was favoring him to eventually entrust the company to him. And this is the result. He has become arrogant by abusing his father's power.
Don't just stand there. Get a move on.
He acts as if he rose to the position of manager through his own abilities, treating employees like pawns, which is unbearable to watch. The employees under him, knowing they can't defy his power, reluctantly follow his orders. I watched this scene in dismay, wondering if I would end up like them. As expected, Caden's harassment towards me began.
Take care of these documents.
He said this while slamming the documents on my desk as I was working on my computer. Looking up, I saw Caden grinning at me, and my face stiffened. No one else could follow my prediction so perfectly.
Even if you're older than me, you're still a newbie. Think of this as learning and get to work.
After handing over the documents, Caden turned his back on me, waved his hand dismissively, and returned to his desk. I sighed as I took the documents from him. Looking at the contents, I was shocked to see they were clearly meant for the manager. I was utterly astonished at how brazenly he pushed his work onto his subordinates. Glancing back at him, I saw him sitting at his desk, staring at his computer, but I doubted the screen was showing work-related content. With that thought, I couldn't help but sigh. With my own work plus these documents, working overtime today was inevitable. I had planned to leave on time, but now that was out of the question. Moreover, Caden probably knew I couldn't handle these documents as a newbie and gave them to me on purpose to trouble me. He likely wanted me to ask another superior to finish them, as if saying, "Just ask another boss to finish it." Caden's inappropriate methods for guiding employees were giving me a headache. In the end, I finished the documents by asking other supervisors for help. But Caden's bizarre behavior didn't stop there. 3 months after I joined the company,
Just watch and learn.
one day, I accompanied Caden on a sales visit to a client's company, but he pressured me not to speak up. I reluctantly nodded. Since I was still new, it seemed best not to argue. I decided to use this as a learning experience and observe Caden's sales techniques.
I'm sorry, the air conditioner is broken. The room is a bit hot, but please have some chilled water.
When we arrived at the client's company with Caden, we were shown into a room where the air conditioner was broken, and it was hot enough to make sweat bead on our foreheads. It was early July, and the outside temperature was around 86 degrees Fahrenheit that day. Opening the window made it a bit cooler, but it was hardly comforting. I instinctively took out a handkerchief from my suit to wipe the sweat. Next to me, Caden looked devastated by the heat. The office always has the AC on full blast, so he couldn't handle it. Seeing him shrivel up like that was a bit amusing. Let's take up their offer. You should have some too, Caden. I accepted the cold water offered by our client and urged Caden to drink some as well. Snapped back to reality. Caden seemed irritated that I suggested it and glared at me. There was no need to be that angry. After that exchange, we moved on to the main topic, and Caden began the business negotiations with the client. Even though Caden usually half-assed his work, he put on his professional face for the negotiation. I wish he'd treat us employees at the office the way he's acting now. Thinking this sincerely, we finished the negotiation despite the heat. The water we were given was completely gone.
It is damn hot.
After the negotiation, we were on our way back to the company from the client's office. Unable to bear the heat, Caden suddenly decided to take refuge in a nearby cafe and went inside. Then I followed after him.
Hey, hurry up and order some iced coffee.
I got it. Caden sat down heavily on a seat. He then instructed me to order iced coffee while sitting across from me. Following his order, I called the waiter and asked for 2 iced coffees. The dependable Caden from earlier was nowhere to be found. He had reverted to the person I usually saw, and I shrugged my shoulders. It really was hot. Shall we grab some lunch while we're at it? Looking at the clock in the cafe, it was already past noon. So before returning to the office, I asked him that. Then Caden, as if he had a brilliant idea, started grinning.
On your dime.
Of course, what would you like from the menu? Seeing me respond calmly, Caden now looked displeased. He probably expected me to be troubled, but unfortunately, I don't complain about such things. After that, he bluntly said, "Pizza." So I called the waiter and ordered a pizza and spaghetti. By the way, the spaghetti was my order. There wasn't much conversation, but Caden remained in a bad mood. That was to be expected. Having lunch with someone you don't like would obviously be unpleasant. But I secretly found it amusing that Caden ordered pizza. Another month later, although Caden's harassment continued, a certain conversation completely changed the situation. A $30 million overseas business deal? Caden had received news of a deal much larger than anything before. It seemed President Ron had set the stage for his son's further advancement. Indeed, if this deal succeeded, Caden would undoubtedly advance further. Although I was chosen to accompany him and would likely get some attention, Caden wouldn't like that. I was prepared for him to take some action. Then came the date of the overseas business meeting. Even though it was an overseas deal, the meeting was to be held at the client's office in the country. Caden and I made sure to arrive 5 minutes early and walk to the client's office. The relentless sunlight was searing our bodies. The sky was clear with not a single cloud, and the sun had been blazing since morning. Mirages shimmered ahead on the road. Wiping the sweat from my face with a handkerchief, we finally arrived at the client's office. But then, Caden suddenly burst out laughing, startling me. "What's so funny?" At first, I was worried he had gone mad from the heat, but that didn't seem to be the case. Sweat beading on his forehead, Caden smirked and said,
Wait outside, old man.
"What did you say?" For a moment, I couldn't understand what he meant. Was he really telling me to wait outside in this scorching heat? That was far too dangerous, even for me. There was a serious risk of heat stroke or sunstroke. Caden, are you serious? It's impossible to wait outside in this heat.
If you start feeling dizzy, you can just find somewhere else to wait. But you are not coming inside. I'm gonna seal this $30 million deal all on my own. I don't need you ruining my bright future.
Even though I was supposed to accompany him, he intended to exclude me entirely from the meeting. It didn't matter to him what would happen to me out here.
This is an order from your boss. Just wait there quietly. I'll successfully close the $30 million deal, don't worry.
Waving his hand dismissively, Caden walked into the building. Left alone, I couldn't help but feel a bit despondent, but I looked around for some shade. There was a tree nearby, so I sat down in its shade. Fortunately, I had brought a thermos of ice water, just in case something like this happened. I took it out and took a sip, thinking how lucky I was to have started carrying a thermos since the time Caden and I went to that client's office with the broken AC. This should help prevent heat stroke. Now I just had to wait for Caden. After waiting for about 5 hours, I saw Caden and the client coming out of the building, and I stood up.
Thank you very much. It's like a dream come true.
It seemed the deal had gone well, judging by the client's cheerful voice. I walked over to them. "I've been waiting for you, Caden."
What? You actually stayed out here the whole time?
Caden was shocked to see me. Then the client noticed us and turned around. In that moment, he looked extremely shocked. His name was written as Thomas. "Yes, I've been waiting for about 5 hours. So, how did the $30 million deal go?"
Of course, I sealed it with my skills.
As Caden boasted, Thomas's face grew increasingly pale watching our exchange. Grabbing Caden by the shoulder, Thomas said with a fierce expression,
Do you know who he is?
What are you talking?
Caden, puzzled by Thomas's sudden outburst, frowned.
Who? He's an employee at our company and my subordinate. But he's completely useless, so I told him to wait outside instead of joining the meeting.
Laughing heartily as he recalled the incident, Caden didn't notice Thomas staring at him with a pale face.
You've done something truly outrageous.
Ha! Outrageous? What are you talking about?
Caden, bewildered by Thomas's words, tilted his head in confusion. I couldn't help but laugh and decided to reveal the truth. "Caden, actually, this isn't my first time meeting Thomas."
Huh? That's impossible. Are you trying to show off or something?
Even after I confessed, Caden just mocked me, not willing to listen. "Sure, I've only been with the company for 4 months. To someone with little sales experience like me, my story must sound like a lie."
Stop this nonsense. I won't tolerate any more disrespect towards this man. He is the next president of our company.
What? The next president?
Caden looked at me in shock at Thomas's words. Noticing his gaze, I smiled and spoke again. "Sorry for hiding my identity. The truth is, before becoming the next president, I wanted to learn as much as I could. So I left my father's company and joined yours, Caden."
You mean this is your father's company?
Caden looked up at the client's building we had just left. even more astonished. Compared to Caden's company, it was definitely larger, but that wasn't the main point. Yes, that's right. It will eventually become my company. But before that, I wanted to gain some real-world experience. And I'm glad I did, because I learned that people like you are in our partner companies. As Caden realized the meaning of my words, his face turned pale. It was only natural, considering he had constantly harassed me and intentionally excluded me from this important deal. I will, of course, report all your actions to my father.
Wait, if I had known you were the next president of our partner company, I would never have done this.
It's no use whining now, Caden. Besides, I have a witness. Thomas, who heard our entire conversation, is my witness. Realizing this, Caden fearfully turned his gaze to Thomas. Nodding angrily at my words, Thomas shot a sharp look at Caden. He's also my father's right-hand man. Naturally, he will continue in that role when I become president. Therefore, I don't want anything that could be a destabilizing factor for the company. I would immediately cut ties with any company that hires someone like you.
Wait, my negotiation skills are top-notch. I closed this $30 million deal. You can't just cut me off.
No matter how good your negotiation skills are, no one will follow someone who treats employees like pawns and uses them as stepping stones for their own advancement. What do you think, Thomas? When I asked for Thomas's opinion, he nodded in agreement with me. Then he spoke up.
The earlier negotiation is off. No matter how skilled you are, I can't make a deal with someone who disrespects our next president.
Thomas had planned to submit the contract after getting the president's approval, so it hadn't been signed yet. This was a brilliant move on his part. If the contract had been signed, Caden would surely have used it to his advantage. I was relieved we could prevent that before it happened.
Since we haven't signed the contract yet, please leave.
This cannot be.
Caden was devastated by Thomas's final blow. It's truly unfortunate. If we had worked together, both our companies could have grown and had a bright future. But upon reflection, it's clear that we are fundamentally different. As Thomas urged me inside, I stopped next to Caden and said, even though we both inherited our parent companies, there's a clear difference between us. You, who have been sheltered by your father's company, doing whatever you please, and me, who has gained real-world experience at another company. The difference is obvious. You boast about your skills, but in the end, you were just riding on your father's coattails. With that triumphant remark, I walked past him and went inside the company with Thomas. Caden was left speechless, collapsing to the ground, and remained there in a daze for a while. Later, an employee came to scold him, telling him to move aside, and Caden left the company, shoulders slumped.
Did that really happen? We should definitely go complain.
No need to bother. Please, don't worry about it. After being guided to an air-conditioned reception room by Thomas, I told him what had happened. Thomas was furious upon learning about Caden's misdeeds. It had been a while since I last saw Thomas, as I had been gaining experience at other companies. His anger on my behalf was touching, and it made it easier to forget Caden's harassment. Moreover, having waited in the scorching sun for 5 hours earlier, I was pampered in every way possible. Thomas seemed overly concerned, providing me with every cooling device the company had. Previously, I wouldn't even carry a thermos of cold water, so his reaction was understandable. When he brought a 2-liter bottle of water, Worried I hadn't been hydrated, I was a bit taken aback. I'm really fine. I found shade under a tree the company planted and spent my time there. If there hadn't been a tree, I might have spent the whole time in the sun, but I would have found somewhere else to wait. So there was no need to worry. Besides, I had another savior with me. It's my thermos.
Kevin, you brought a thermos? You usually just buy drinks from vending machines.
That's why gaining experience was worth it. I learned it from our client's company. I'll never forget the taste of that ice-cold water. The office had a broken AC, but what I gained there was invaluable. Waiting in the shade during the scorching heat was all thanks to that cold water I drank then. I also learned that any mishap could be a learning opportunity. Seeing me smile, Thomas looked puzzled. In any case, I was relieved that things hadn't gotten worse. Meanwhile, back at his own company, Caden quickly reported what had happened with me to his father, President Ron. But what he heard next was,
What? I'm being demoted.
Caden was immediately demoted that very day.
A representative handling Kevin's resignation came by earlier and submitted his resignation, effective today. It turns out he's the son of the president of one of our client companies and the next in line to be president himself.
At the same time, Caden flinched under the stern gaze of his father. Ignoring him, the president continued.
In exchange for overlooking your numerous harassments towards Kevin, it was requested that this overseas deal be nullified and that you be demoted. I promise to take this matter seriously, even though you're my son, to maintain a good relationship with his company. But your demotion is inevitable.
But Dad, shouldn't you side with your own son?
If I don't, our company will go bankrupt. Do you want that?
Caden was at a loss for words when his father raised his voice. As Caden began to grasp the situation, the president spoke again.
You must realize that their company, with branches overseas, is superior to ours. If you don't want to end up on the streets, you better comply. It seems I overestimated you.
The president, not knowing that his son had been abusing his power, finished with a sigh. Disappointed by his father as well, Caden finally realized his mistakes. And so, Caden's demotion was decided. And then a year later, after his demotion, Caden started over as a regular employee. The old Caden was gone. He no longer treated employees like pawns and diligently focused on his work. Aiming to become a manager again someday, he was gradually regaining the trust of both the president and his colleagues. As for me, I successfully became the president. My father was strict, and it took a long time for me to gain his approval. But after a year back at his company, he finally acknowledged me. I felt that my efforts, including my real-world experience, were not in vain. Thomas, I look forward to working with you as my right-hand man starting today.
Of course, I've served diligently as your father's right-hand man, so rest assured.
Thomas, who had been my father's right-hand man, declared confidently. I couldn't help but smile at his words, but he truly was reliable. Things I couldn't achieve alone felt possible with him by my side. It was actually Thomas who had posed as the resignation agent a year ago when visiting Ron. After I told him about Caden's misdeeds, Thomas had taken the initiative to act as my agent. People like him are rare. Though he had always been my father's right-hand man, he showed loyalty to me as well. Apparently, he felt a great debt of gratitude for something my father had done for him in the past. Neither of them spoke much about it, and I chose not to pry. Today marks the beginning of my work as president, and I want to focus on that. Gaining experience as a president and leading the company to greater success is my goal, and I will continue to strive towards it.